Go ahead. Welcome to the Wednesday, March 29th, 2023 Garrison Board of Education regular business meeting and budget presentation. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apicello. Here. David Gelber.
Here.
Madeline Julian.
Here.
Courtney McCarthy.
Here.
Kent Schott.
Excused?
Matthew Spicer.
Here.
Sarah Tormey.
Here. Okay. Pledge of Allegiance now. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have accept agenda changes. Do I have any proposed changes to this evening's agenda?
I'd like to propose that we move president's remarks up before the budget presentation, please.
Anyone object to that change? Any other recommended changes? Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the agenda as amended. May I have a motion, please?
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? All right. We'll jump right in with President's remarks. I'm going to begin by announcing that Madeline has decided to spend more time with her family on Wednesday evenings, and due to her work commitments, will be stepping down, so we will have another seat on the ballot. We want to sincerely thank you for all of your service. I don't know, I mean, jump in here as facilities chair too, please, what the facilities committee would have done without you. I hope you will consider dropping in on facilities committee meetings and lending your expertise. Jocelyn, don't discourage her, we need her. It was seriously, this is an amazing time commitment, and we really appreciate all the time and effort you've put in, and you've been a very big asset to this board and served your community so well. I do have a small token, so when you're not here, you can have some bubbly.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
So all the formalities have been done, Dusty, and now I hope you really enjoy your last meeting with us.
Can I say just
Of
one?
course, go ahead.
Thank you all for this. I do have to say that it's been an honor and a privilege to get to know you all, the board. We spend a lot of time together, and it is a lot of time commitment, aside from these meetings, the executive meetings, the committee meetings. And I know how hard everyone works here, and how much you care about not only the district, but the community and every single student. So I got to see that firsthand, and I'm honored to have been part of it, and getting to know all of you. The staff, the teachers, I also got to see a little bit of what you do. You're like the heart of the district. So thank you so much for all you do, all the way from administration to facilities, to our aides, to all of our teachers. It's been great. It's been a great experience. And I will be in the community. I will still be volunteering here and there. So I will be involved in other things. But thank you. It's been great. And I guess that's it.
Yeah, go for it.
I don't think most people in the community, I don't want to boil everything you've done down to facilities, but I don't think people realize the extent to which Madeline has single-handedly saved us a lot of money, with money in the air right now. And also you just know what you're talking about, and you always do it with eloquence and profound insight. So we're deeply indebted for everything you've done to make the capital project happen.
Thank you.
And just on an administrative note, that does mean we will have 3 seats on the ballot. So one will be for a 1-year term, starting in May. And appreciate Madeline's thought in allowing the public to select her successor for the remainder of her term. seeing as we do have president's remarks right now, I also want to add that I've been going to some of the O'Neill budget meetings. I know Courtney and David went to their meeting last week as well, the joint meeting with our high school partner O'Neill. Their budget process has been very interesting. I've learned a lot so far. I'm hoping to go again tomorrow. One of the things, the big takeaways I have for our board is, they start a little later because they're still waiting on state numbers. So they don't have a lot of numbers to present yet. But they have a lot of presentations on what they do really well, which I thought was really nice to see. Particularly, I saw one on the pre-K. They'd started a pre-K about a year before us, and how that has impacted their kindergartners. So that might be something our board can look at next fall, is to having a presentation from some of our teachers on how pre-K is impacting kindergarten. So if I learn anything more, I will continue to report back. But so far, they've been very welcoming, and I really appreciate that. They're wonderful partners. So I think that's all I've got tonight, so I'll keep this moving ahead. We're going to have superintendent's remarks afterwards, but that brings us to the 2023-2024 budget presentation. This is our third one. I will ask that we only, because the board has heard this presentation, we've had some requests from members to only hear the new slides if possible tonight, so that we can then move on to a board discussion. Would you prefer we hold our questions till the end so we can get through those slides, and then we'll have questions from the board at the end? Sure. Does that work for everybody? All right. All right, there you go, Carl and Joe, it's all yours.
So I will begin with a brief introduction. I know these are not necessarily new slides, but I do think based on the feedback that we've received, we had a Saturday budget forum. I want to say 16 or 18 of our community members were nice enough to give us some time on Saturday to share their thoughts and their ideas. And it was a time to have an open dialogue. So we learned a lot. The board, Joe Jimick, myself, we've been hearing from community members. We've done some informal meetings, phone conversations, answering of emails. And some people start by saying, I'm sorry to bother you, and I know you're busy. And I always say back, we welcome this, and we appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your insight. Don't ever feel like you need to apologize. It is helpful, and I mean that. It's an opportunity to communicate and talk about what is a very important topic, and that is the current state of finances here in Garrison. So we will move through only new slides, but I think it's worth just talking about that this process started back in January with the Board Finance Committee. Sarah Tormey, Madeline, and Kent are all serving members of the Finance Committee, and we did talk about goals based on last year's override, which took 2 attempts before it passed in June. We had a lot of feedback that we received back then, and even leading up to the early development stages. And we set a goal to stay within the allowable tax levy. And that number is 3.3%. That is something that you don't learn early on. It takes some time for Joe to do the calculations and find out what we're allowed to raise taxes by. But once we heard it was 3.3%, the next thing was, let's be transparent about this. Let's engage the community. That's what the past 2 months have been. This evening is no different. We are trying to do our best to communicate the budget, what it involves, and what we think is in store for us in the future. We also talked about having budget lines that were based on accurate projections. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of unknowns in education. There are decisions being made over the next 2 to 3 months that could impact the budget, but we need a budget in place, and the board needs to adopt it on April 12th. Okay, that's our next meeting. Once it's adopted, it cannot be changed. And then the public votes on it on May 16th. But we need to make projections and assumptions now based on the information we have. And we did think, going on to point 4, maintaining staffing and levels of program that support all of our goals and initiatives, that was key. And when we figured out that we could do it within a 3.3 allowable tax levy, that's when the decision was made to roll it out to the entire board and the public. Over the past couple of meetings, we've done so. So I want to emphasize that the budget here this evening that we are recommending to the board does preserve program. There are some changes to staff, but program is intact. Based on Saturday, a few people said, what is your long-term goal? You are using some fund balance to balance this budget. We've used some special aid to balance the budget. That, of course, is not a good long-term strategy, and rightfully so, community members are asking, what is the long-term strategy? This may be an oversimplification, but basically what we would like to do at some point in the near future is to have our revenues cover our expenditures. And that's easier said than done, but that is the goal. You don't want to use fund balance to close your budget gap. That's not a good long-term strategy, but we do believe for this year it is something worth doing. Also, tied into that is eliminate our reliance on fund balance. And this year, Joe, I believe it's around $650,000 or so that we are using to close this budget gap. Now I'm going to fast forward here because we are aligned, the programs, the initiatives are aligned with the vision of a graduate. The enrollment are very desirable numbers. All of this will be posted on the website for you to review. Most of Garrison, pre-K through 8 is in one section with the exception of one grade level. I'm going to pause here. I don't think I spent enough time on this last time, but also a consideration of the Finance Committee is looking at high school. In our informal coffee conversation earlier, I learned that many people don't realize we have to pay for high school students. We learned that going out and you know, trying to inform people about our budget last year, and some people don't realize that that is a legal requirement for Garrison. But the Finance Committee did look at, from this year to next year, really our total high school enrollment, that's 9 through 12, is really flat. So that was a consideration. The following year, you do see an increase, and even a further increase in 25, 26. So those are headwinds. And that could be one reason why we may need to do an override in the future. But again, looking at this year, year over year, not a huge increase in high school tuition expense. We thought we could make it work this year, and the budget that we are sharing with you tonight does work. Overall staffing, I want to just pause here for a minute. Just down by 0.4% of one particular position. I know some people thought that program was being cut. This happens to be an art position. Program is not being cut. We have the same exact number of art classes scheduled for next year that we currently have this year. There is no cut to program, but because we've gone from 2 sections to 1, and because we've also gone from a 9-period day to an 8-period day and extended core academic instructional time, the need for this position over the past couple of years has reduced. And we can provide all the same level of art with a 0.6. This just shows year over year the frequency of the art sessions. Again, this will all be posted. You can examine it closely. The other change is a CPSE, CSE chair combined with a psychologist position. This current year, we do have a part-time psychologist. We did have a psychologist resign last year. It was late in the summer, and we were fortunate enough to have a retired veteran psychologist join us. She is not here every day, but we did a close examination of the counseling needs and all of the testing needs and evaluation needs, and we are very confident that the psychologist who we've already hired, who will start next year, can handle all of the mandated counseling, all of the building level counseling, evaluations, observations, but also chair roughly 40 CPSE or CSE meetings, which typically the bulk of them happen right now, April and May. That is the time for annual reviews. So this is something that in the past we used an outside CSE chair, but we definitely think we can handle this internally and do it very effectively. And the person, by the way, that we hired does this currently. So that also raises our confidence levels. In the district that he is in, he has a higher caseload of mandated counseling and also chairs CSEs and 504s. And he does it exceptionally well according to all of his references. Now, for this portion, the financial piece, I will turn it over to Joe Jimick, our business administrator, and he's going to go quickly through some slides and then pause where we've made some adjustments.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, so these are on the slide deck that you'll be able to see on the website, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on those. So there is some significant upgrades for technology that supports our HVAC system, which is now all computerized, our telephone system, which is voice over IP, our door locks, our security cameras, our public address system, all those things are supported by the network. So we've got a map here of the network, and I'm just going to let James say what this is all about because this is not my thing.
The main focus and one of the major expenditures that we're trying to fix is if you look in the upper right-hand quadrant where there's the green and the red box there, and it starts with the yellow box first. That's what's called a daisy chain. What that means is that if any of those three boxes goes down, all three of them go down. Not just one, all three. To put it in simpler terms, those three boxes are what powers from the business office to the whole elementary wing. So they would lose door access, HVAC access, camera access, door access, wireless access, all in one. So we need to basically rewire the lower half of the school so that we can get out of that daisy chain. The other piece that is listed there is those aqua blue boxes on the right-hand side that are tied to the yellow box. I'm using non-technical terms just so that it's a little bit easier to understand. The yellow piece is the brains of our servers. It's what really makes our servers and how we can print, store our files, all of that. All of it, that yellow piece is totally end of life at the end of this year, meaning we don't get any support. We couldn't get parts to replace it. So that is something that we have no choice but to replace. If we don't, then we could lose all our servers in one foul swoop. So those are the two main pieces that are listed here that need to be replaced and are part of the budget. Another thing that we're doing is right now we're with a private company for data and technical integration. We are planning on moving to what's known as the LYRIC, or the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center. This is a state organization that is funded, and anything that we purchase through them, including the support, the software, any technical services, we get about 33% aid back. So the difference is if we stay with the private company, we have 0% aid. Going to the RIC, we get 30% back on the dollar. They have a staff of over 250 engineers. There's a small staff with the private company, a very, very small staff. 70% of districts in Rockland, Putnam, and Westchester use the full service for networks, meaning their whole network is managed just like what we're going to be managed. And 90% of use them for some form of network services and instructional purchasing. So it's a very, very large percentage. Very few districts use private companies. Why we're making the change this year and why we haven't made it in the past is because going back that slide, our servers, for us to try and replace that environment ourselves would literally cost 3 times as much as what the Lyric will be offering us. And there we get automatic backups, very tight security, a staff to support the servers, automatic updates. So a lot of benefit by going to the RIC. So that was really the tipping point as far as moving from the private company, and why we haven't moved from the private company to the RIC is the servers becoming end of life.
James, why would any district sign up with a private company? Because the incentives seem clearly to favor the Lyric.
It's a great question. There are some districts that are larger than our district and have a very large internal technical staff. And there are some superintendents that support the philosophy of being very independent and not relying on outside organizations. It's very, very few within the region. It's literally 3 very large districts that have kind of adopted that philosophy. The others just are either with different private companies or have a large internal technical staff.
Seeing as we paused for a question, does anyone else have any questions on these slides? Go ahead.
Question. How much more the total cost are we paying for this with this change? Understanding that there's a 33% aid increase, how much is this going to increase based on what we're paying now versus this new company?
Great segue, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Right now, I have to show this slide to answer your question. So one thing that we are doing right now is actually going to the Putnam County Sheriff's Department because some of these have to do with safety, cameras, heating, door locks, that kind of thing. We're planning on we've already gone to the sheriff, and he's indicated that there's a likelihood that he would support using federal funds to help us pay for that. If we were to get the sheriff's funds on top of the aid that we're getting, the difference year over year, budget to budget, in the technology budget would be $45,000. Without that, without the $33,000 from the sheriff, then of course it's about $78,000 increase.
How much of that is one time versus is it reoccurring in terms of, because there's a setup to getting the new server in
Right.
place, which we would need to do whether it's private or public in order to have the server.
Right,
Correct?
right.
In non speak.
Right now, it's hard to answer the question because right now, software companies, year over year over year over year, since the pandemic, and when they got inundated with so much internet traffic, they're passing on that cost. You can say it slowly, but in a public schools case, it's much larger. So year over year, most software is going up by 10%. So when you add that all in, it's hard to project one-time costs and what will the budget look like next year. But the technology budget would definitely go down next year. It's hard to say by how much because of the hardware costs would go way down, but the software costs will cut into some of that savings.
Are we, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm still a little bit confused. So this is the hardware cost, and the slide before this was more of maintenance engineer in services. So what's the how much are we paying now, and what would be a difference in the services? Understanding that if we proceed with this hardware cost, it's a one-time fee that we shouldn't have to, it shouldn't come up next year. So what's the 45,000 that you mentioned?
The whole technology budget in totality would be a $45,000 increase. That would include the services, the software, everything altogether.
And that's now, for this proposed budget, is over 200,000, is that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I just wanted to ask, on the software, when we buy it through the RIC, are they buying it, like, is it
Bulk.
purchasing, is it a bulk buy?
Bulk.
Is that how we get the best rate, or is there another way to get a better rate?
Well, it's buying by bulk, but it's also buying because we also get 33% back. So it's a little bit of both. And we also get PD built in with if we buy on our own, we're paying for PD on top of it. When we buy some of the software through P&W BOCES, we buy some of the software through the RIC. And so it just depends on if it's instructional or if it's business. Business, it's more on the RIC side. Educational, instructional technology, it's more with P&W BOCES. Both of them, you get the same 8.
Do you have any other questions before we move on? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James. Okay, inflation obviously is a challenge. We all know that. Okay, we do have, based upon our aid formula, not a significant increase in aid coming. The taxes in Garrison are very low. The last column on the chart is how many times more, how many times higher the tax rate is in these other towns versus Garrison. Obviously, Garrison's tax rate is the lowest by far. It is, whoops, go back to just this slide once. Garrison is one of the lowest in the state. Out of 678 districts, Garrison is ranked 616th in the tax rate. So one of the things, obviously, there's two basic questions. Is it reasonable to expect the same educational program at less than half the rate of our neighbors? And then, we do have the challenges with fund balances we spoke about. So we have reached out to our New York State representatives. There is still, in the budget proposal from the Senate, there is a line in there that has Garrison listed for $180,000 in grant and aid. We are not currently including that as a part of our revenue budget because obviously the budget for the state is not adopted yet. We can't count on that until the 3 people in the room negotiations are over and the budget is adopted. We can't count on that number. So it is a proposal. It might make it in, it might not, but there is a potential out there for $180,000 in aid. If we do get it, it would obviously improve the financial conditions for next year. We do have, there will be a resolution on the vote to add Putnam Valley as a multi-year contract for tuition, which would allow us to fix that rate. So the tax cap for Garrison is based on factors that are set by the state. The biggest change year over year that makes it not 2% is the change in the amount of debt service expense with the issuance of the bonds for the project.
Just on that last slide,
Yep.
Joe, can we predict at all what it will be
Absolutely. Yeah, for the future, the bond has been sold, so
So we
there's a
kn-
20, there's a 20-year life of the bond. It, you know, we know the amounts.
For 24, 25?
Yeah, we know.
Also, the Finance Committee did look at, we do hold about, I want to say, 880,000 in a fund balance reserve, and we chose not to use that at this time because of the life of the bond. We didn't wish to apply it this year. Also, it would deplete how much we could go out for. Because if we put in that, no, am I saying that correctly, Joe?
Yes.
If we put in money from reserve to pay the bond service, we then would drop what the cap would be.
So where that comes in is the exclusion to the tax cap that goes into the formula, that 706,000 where it says coming year exemptions. That is the district's component of the capital expenditure that's not covered by aid. And if we used reserves, that would reduce the number, which would basically reduce the tax levy. So it does reduce the tax levy if we use the reserve, but it doesn't help any fiscal concerns that we may have.
But you're saying that we can estimate that figure for next year
Oh,
already?
yes, because it's
in
a
the
bond
document.
schedule. It's like having your mortgage where you know what the payments are
Yep.
for the next few years. So this was driven by the Finance Committee. The plan, based upon the budget that's set forth right now, is no, that we're not going to seek an override. And the 3.29% is a simple majority vote. This is just a overview of the revenue budget. The items there in green basically are saying we had projected for 22-23 our state aid to be 916,000. It came in at 925, so obviously that was really close. So we are using reserves to support next year's budget. We're using the retirement reserve, which is an employees' retirement system, and the teachers' retirement system reserves in order to have enough fund balance to support next year's budget. So this is a new slide. This is a update from a slide that was used in last year's budget presentation. And this shows what we expect to happen with fund balance. And it also shows the trend year over year.
Joe, can I just pause here too? This does show that Garrison has historically, since the tax cap was put in place, relied on appropriated fund balance in order to close our budget. So the shift away that we talked about earlier is going to take some time because it's what we've done for going back. I think when you go back to even 2011, it was basically to use fund balance to close the gap. In some years, we have even more fund balance at the end. Is that correct reading of these numbers?
Yes, so there wasn't a very good correlation between budget to actual up until very recently. There was a significant amount of under budgeting revenue and over budgeting expenditures. And then it varied year over year. Some of the biggest changes that you see in recent history is the capital project vote authorized the use of $1 million in fund balance to support the capital project. And that is the decrease that you see from 1920 to 2021. That's that $1 million. And then we have been negatively impacted by, obviously, the forces of the last few years with COVID and other things. And the numbers that are highlighted in yellow are estimates for the use of fund balance for this year and for next year.
You can use any mic you want. Just grab a mic.
Why was the fund balance going up when we were using the fund balance?
Okay, so the changes in general fund balance is, the changes in general fund balance that you see there, when it's a number in parentheses, that is a subtraction. But if the number is not in parentheses, it's adds. So in 17-18, they had planned to use $775,000 of fund balance, but they actually didn't use that. They actually increased fund balance.
So we were off in our budgeting by about $1 million that year. We took in $1
Correct.
million that we didn't actually need to spend.
Yes. Yeah. So the budgeting wasn't very accurate. What we can say is the 2021-22 budget year, the actual amounts for revenue were within 50,000 of actual, and the budget to actual was expenditures 150,000. So it was pretty close. That's our draft budget. You can take a look at it on the website, and we'll also have more information, and the handouts that we had out in the previous meetings, we'll have that up there too. So these are some of the unknowns that are still out there. The budget is comprised based upon the estimates of what we know right now. They're not exact. They're the best that we have with the information that we have available. We do have things that are yet to be determined with transportation. Private school transportation is something that we also have to do within 15-mile driving distance between a student's home and their private school. If it's less than 15 miles, we have to transport that, and those are due back by April 1st. And then special education, we don't necessarily know all of the placements and where they're going to be next year. We have a pretty good idea on most, if not all of them, but it's not certain until all those CSE meetings happen and the annual reviews happen. We don't necessarily have that locked in. And the other thing that's still open is the GTA contract ends. It had an MOA, which extended for the year that we're in now. That ends as of June 30th. We are in the process of negotiating a settlement, but until that is known, we don't. That's an outstanding item. So there's a number of placements which we talked about. Will we get that special aid? We don't know. We're hopeful, but we don't know that for certain. And we have been working over the past several months to submit claims to FEMA for some of the costs that were associated of the pandemic. So cleaning costs on the buses and cleaning costs of the building, extra cleaning and sanitizing costs that were incurred for us to be able to stay open. And one of the things I will say is Garrison stayed open considerably more than a lot of neighboring districts and schools. So, this place was operating in part from all of the work that was done here. And the other thing associated with that is the use of iTutor and the distance learning requirement. So we were mandated, we had to have a distance learning option for those people that were either quarantined because they had COVID and they couldn't come, or they had a medical condition or a concern that they didn't want to be in person. So that was a state requirement that we needed to meet, and based upon the board's discussion and Carl's recommendation to add an additional service to do this so that our teachers that were here could focus on the kids here and not split time between the kids here and those remote students. So that was an additional cost, and we're trying to claim for those costs from FEMA. We may get some of them, we may get all of them, we may get none of them, but we have submitted those formally, and we're waiting to hear back on the results for that. I would imagine it would be a month or two before we would know.
You're a year into this process, correct?
Yes.
And you think a couple more months?
I would say it'd probably be a couple more months. So in order to support next year's budget, we need to allocate $684,000 of fund balance and reserves to stay within the cap and to not cut programs. So the $684,000 in reserves would only leave $1.4 million in reserves left in June of 2024. The remaining reserves that are restricted, they can only be used for capital expense and debt service. So there's not a lot left, as you saw in previous presentations, or if you go through the deck, there is not a lot of reserves left, so that is definitely a concern. If some of these special items come in, obviously that'll make next year a little bit easier, but there's still a challenge, obviously, there with the low amount of fund balance that we have.
Can I just ask, what % of the unrestricted fund balance will be remaining if this proposal were to be the one we go with? Meaning, I think there's some kind of best practice of 4%.
Well, the 4% is of the unreserved, so.
Right, so
we won't-
what's this? This is less than 4%?
Yes, so 202,000 is less than 4% of our budget, so that's a little bit low. So the only things that are left in unrestricted are 75,000 in the retirement reserve, and then 45,000 in the tax cert reserve, and the employee benefit reserve fund of 71,000. That's really the only things left that are things that can be accessed.
Do you have an idea yet, based on where we've at on spend, as to how much will roll over? Are we going to be close like last year at about 100 to 200,000 rolling over?
I think we're going to be close. It's going to depend a lot upon electric costs for the rest of the year, but we will be close.
Joe, I don't, speaking personally anyway, I don't have a clear sense of what would be a comfortable level of reserves. Maybe you could explain your thinking on that and how we would get to, if you can put a number on where you would be comfortable having the reserves, and how do we get there?
I think what we would like to see is that the teachers' retirement reserve and the employee retirement reserve would have a year or two of full premium expenses in there for subsequent years if there was a problem. So that's significantly under what it is with the levels that are shown there. So I think you would want to have at least 450 in the teacher's retirement reserve and maybe 300 in the employee retirement reserve to be able to have that.
So about 600,000 more than is up there now.
Yep.
The goal in the past has been to be at the 4%, as Jocelyn mentioned, for the unreserved. Yeah, we've been cited in the past of being well over that. We won't have that issue for a while because we can move the money into other accounts at this point, including capital reserve.
Right. So if we get additional money that we don't anticipate, we can make contributions to the reserves at any time in the year. So if FEMA money comes in October and we want to put it into a reserve, we can. So I think it is still important to say again that this level of available reserves doesn't support a budget next year without some either cuts to program or override or combination of both, if those aid things that were talked about that are possibles don't come in.
The total FEMA number is 391. Okay.
Yeah. So that's obviously a big chunk if it comes in. We think that there's a high probability that 60,000 will come in, but those other ones, specifically the iTutor expense, the representatives from Homeland Security. So through New York State, we work through the Department of Homeland Security to be able to go through FEMA. They don't know of other people doing that particular type of expense through FEMA, so they're not sure. So, they said, by all means, please apply, but we don't know if that's going to go through.
Joe, have you been able to project the 2024-2025 budget, or give us an understanding what it means by academic program cuts? Is it?
I don't think that we have developed that enough to be able to have an intelligent conversation about what that would represent, but it is a potential that we would need academic program cuts in order to do this if we don't do an override.
I mean, we've done so many cuts to academic programs that I don't know if there's anything left to cut.
I would agree that if we want to stick with what our strategic plan is and following along, I don't see a lot of space at all to cut. I think some of the decisions we've made recently have ended up working out very well, which we can get to after this, but I do agree that we're pretty lean in terms of, academic program. I think if you saw any give, it would be in special education is where we would see a change in budget lines, and not in terms of in the building, but out of district placements.
All right, so these are the savings that we had spoken about earlier. So one of the things that we are looking at is following all the legal requirements for transportation. We are reducing the number of large buses that we're using next year, and there are some adjustments that are going to be required in order to make that happen. And this is a development that takes place over the next several months as we finalize all the locations where we're going to have to be and what the pickup times are and who is going where and all the requests that come in and the students that are in special education. All those things get rolled in together, and we route all these routes, and we determine when the stops are going to be and what time, which bus, all that. So we're in the process of consolidating what we have currently on 4 buses onto 3, and that takes time. And then we have to see if the runs will work physically with the routing, and it'll work with the timing with the high school and the K-8 buses. So that's part of this cut for the large bus. There's still obviously some unknowns that need to be figured out.
Can you give an update on the last meeting regarding the 2-mile radius and our compliance and need for
I'll-
or not need to
I'll
include
take that
as a
one. I also
proposition?
spoke to the lawyers again this week. So, yes. So we do need a proposition for transporting students under 2 miles. The public needs to approve that. Right now, we're still searching to see if that proposition exists. I believe, Carl, if you go back past the 80s or 70s, we're now into paper boxes. So it's going to take some time. We're going to keep looking for it. It's not going to be part of the May vote unless we really strongly feel it needs to be. But at this point, that's not the recommendation from council. It's to look for it, figure out what our plan is. If we need that proposition, we can put it out at any time and ask the public to approve it. We do need to put the dollar amount it will cost the district for that transportation with the proposition. If it doesn't cost anything else, we don't have to put a dollar sign next to it. For example, if we aren't adding a bus in order to pick up kids, we don't need to put a dollar sign next to it. We just need to ask the public to say, approve this. the proposition may also exist. I know we've had previous board members speak to the fact that they remember transportation here for as long back. So Dusty, thank you for your continued search and of all the boxes in our records looking for this. But does that answer the question? That's sort of where we are, and we will continue to follow up with council on it. Anyone else have questions on that?
Dusty is accepting donations of Claritin.
Our records keeper, we do have a records clerk that we pay for every year, Kathy Clark, so she'll help too.
So we're recommending that we should seek a maximum allowable tax levy of 3.29% increase. And if the vote is defeated on May 16th, the board can hold a revote on June 20th, and they could propose the same budget or a different one. Or they could adopt a contingent budget. Contingent budget would be a 0% increase, and it would require $341,000 of additional cuts.
All right, I think the board's seen the propositions. Can we stop there and move to discussion? These are all posted. I would encourage the public to read through them.
Can I actually ask a question on the
Oh,
proposition?
sure. Well, there we go.
The proposition, the second one, why don't we have, excuse me, in the wording, shall the Board of Ed of Guffs, in order to be permitted to access the 90,000 SAM grant for the balance of the replacement costs, be authorized to expend monies? Why can't we put that in there?
We can ask council. The propositions are provided by council,
Yeah,
so we can ask council.
Because that would help.
I did ask council.
And?
We thought exactly the same thing. And Chris Lanchanton reworked it and feels this is the most accurate, that could be somewhat confusing to the public. We can communicate that, but this is the language.
Okay.
And I pushed on it because we want to be as clear as we can possibly be. And yes, what Jocelyn is referring to for the audience is the $45,000 that we'd like to use from the fund is going to be combined with a $90,000 SAM's grant to complete the hot water heater project. If this is not approved, we lose out on that $90,000. So that can't be communicated, unfortunately, in this proposition language, according to council, but we will do our best to communicate that because, of course, we want to access that $90,000 to complete the project.
I just can't believe we can't have that in, but thank you for checking.
I guess the other important item is, at the next board meeting, we have to have a vote to adopt the budget by the board.
Can you get Chris to explain what her reasoning was for excluding the 90,000 from the proposition?
Will do, David.
All right, so we're going to open this up for board questions and discussions. We need, two things I'd like to do is take first questions. I think kind of did them on any of the new material, but if you have any follow-up, let's start there. And then we need to get to a point where we have a poll of the board as to where we stand regarding accepting this budget, because it would need to be adopted at the next meeting, okay? So first, do we have any outstanding questions on any of the new material or old material as presented that we haven't asked yet? Okay. Then we'll move on from there. And does anyone have any thoughts they want to share on adopting this budget as is?
Well, I mean, I'm in favor of adopting the budget
Okay.
as it stands, because my sense, and I think Kent's sense as well, although I don't want to speak for him, he's not here, is that we essentially communicated a promise or a commitment to the community that we were not going to seek an override this year. I think this budget has a lot to recommend it. We're not cutting any of our academic services. But I think the overarching thing is that we just, we didn't formally write anything, but I think it was very clear from what the board's conversation was about this, that we were not going to seek an override this year, and I feel that people in the community would feel as if they were sandbagged if we violate that informal commitment.
Matt?
Yeah, I agree with that. I support it for the same reason.
Who wants to go first? Madeline?
I support it as well, but we have to make it really clear to the community that it's going to be a bigger lift next year because of it. And this budget, it is already impacting, right, some of the amenities that the students have. It means longer bus rides, and there's been definitely other cuts. So
I don't think we know yet if it's going to mean longer bus rides yet, based on where people are.
I mean, my main problem with the budget is that we're taking all that money out of the reserves. We should not be doing that, right? But I don't think that, I think the overriding fact is that we have made a promise, a commitment to this community not to do an override vote this year. And given that fact, I don't see how we can go back on that commitment.
Courtney, did you want to jump in?
Really, it's just to voice my support of this budget, for all the work that went into it. While yes, there's changes every year, but I think as a board, we have made the commitment to not cut programming, to keep students first. I see over the last year or two, what we have added is an extremely competent administrative team. They have worked extremely hard to make excellent hiring decisions. We have an environmental educator who works with all grades in the school. We have added a pre-K. There are electives and options for all of our students, including STEAM, debate, theater, chorus, e-music, band. We have added a third high school choice. And the budget that Joe and the Finance Committee has put together shows that we can sustain all of these educational opportunities for our students. We have the money to do it. We know that we've got the time now to prepare for what's coming next. We have a team who I really believe knows what they're doing. And we're going to start looking towards next year. But I believe that this is a good budget and I support it.
I think in terms of, just to add to that, in terms of, looking ahead into all the things we've added, I don't think we've worked hard enough as a board to highlight that to the community. The environmental education program is only 2 years old. It took us a long time to put that together. That came out of the planning process with the focus on getting students into the forest more, going to the teachers and asking them, well, what do you need to make that happen? You need an extra person, somebody help plan with curriculum. So those changes take time, but now that we have those programs in place, I think we really need to talk about them more. So if we are in a position next year where we need an override, we can say, well, this program is really worth supporting. So I think that's something I've learned just from listening to the community this year, that we really could do better, is to talk about what we're doing well. Jocelyn, you want to jump in?
Say that I feel like it's silly and irresponsible of us to say that we promised we wouldn't do an override, but we won't promise anything right now that we will do an override next year. People keep skirting around the fact that it seems inevitable, but I would also feel silly and irresponsible promising anything as a board to the community. I mean, except that we're seeing the numbers, and I think we owe it. I mean, I've asked and would like to see an alternative override budget. It's not here, but I do think we owe it then to the community to suggest what's coming next year, especially if we're going out and asking people to vote for this budget. We've got to tell them, like, you can vote for this, but next year there will likely be this. Just like we're claiming that last year we promised there would be no override. So I don't like the P word on this. And here's what I want to ask. If we assume that our proposed budget passes this year, this one, we know what our levy was, can we assume our tax base growth factor based on an average over the past 10 years? Can we assume that well, I guess we know our prior year capital levy. We can assume 0 pilots. We know our coming year exemptions. We can assume that state aid isn't going to change except for the 3% increase. We can maybe make a range of an assumption on inflation. I don't know what it's going to be, but whatever it might be. We can assume that there's 9 additional high school students going to high school, so we have to increase that tuition. We can assume special ed is the same, or add 1 or 2, or give a range. We can assume we won't make any staff cuts, we won't make any program cuts, because that's what we keep promising. And we can assume that we will not dip into reserves because, frankly, there are none left. So if we make those assumptions, can't we have a number for next year? So we can go out to our supporters and otherwise and say, just let's start getting ready now. I don't understand why we can't.
If I may, the one big factor, and this won't, I don't think this will be a consideration into the future. The FEMA money, that's a once-in-a-generation thing, right? That is available to us because of the pandemic. So we spent more to support children during the pandemic, and now there may be money available to us. Again, as Joe, just to reiterate, Joe spoke about, we're very confident we may get at least 60 or 70,000, but it could be close to 400,000. Same with the $180,000 that the Senate is proposing. My understanding is the Senate has a lot of influence in all the representatives that I spoke to. That doesn't mean it's happening, and it would be irresponsible to put it in the budget now. And there's a lot of battles going on up in Albany over other issues, and the budget, actually, there's a good chance it'll be late. They try to have it for April 1st, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's 2 weeks from now, maybe longer. But you add those together, there is a potential of 550 to 600,000, which really changes the outlook of your fund balance.
Does it change the structural deficit we have with our budget?
No.
Right. It doesn't. I think it's great, and I hope we get it.
I think we are
But-
communicating to the community. I mean, I
No,
don't
no,
think-
everyone tonight has said if we go for an override, or we may have to go for an override. So that's not clear.
I think it's pretty clear. I mean,
Well, then I don't that seems so wishy-washy.
well, we can't put a number on it right now, but I think everyone can see that we're in trouble. I also want to point out that we are proposing a budget that increases taxes. I mean, it's not,
Yeah,
we're
I'm
raising
not-
them to the
I'm not all
maximum.
for increasing taxes. I just want
Right.
to have a structurally sound budget.
No, I know. I just want to sort of say that out loud. I feel like we're asking people to pay more.
Every year we do.
Of course.
At least the 2.
We should.
Yeah.
Right, but I feel like the tone sort of implies that we're not. And we definitely should be looking at the future in terms of the override. I think everybody agrees on that. It's just,
Does everybody agree on that?
I think we will. If
Does everybody
everything's-
agree?
If everything
That
stays
we're
the
gon-
same, yes, I think we will need an override next year. I'd like to see some things settled. I would like to speak to the point about, yes, the promise isn't really where I see the issue with it this year. I see an issue with it this year with the risk. And
Yeah,
to
that's
put that is, I think that is my position as to why it doesn't make sense this year. When I talk about risk, what I'm really thinking about is between when the first budget went down, the override last year, and the second budget, we listed out specific positions that were at risk. 2 of those positions, our school psychologist and director of technology and innovation, found other positions at the beginning of the school year. We then started the school year without a director of technology and innovation and with a part-time psychologist. We were able to change course, thanks large part to Carl's connections, to find us a new director of technology and innovation in the fall. I don't think it's best for students to put them at risk this year if we don't have to. Those positions impact kids. And I think the goal of this budget is not to impact kids. So if the budget goes down, the first vote, obviously, we can't tell anyone how to vote, we can just present the facts, but looking historically, our budgets haven't passed by a lot. The first one went down last year, and those are the trends that make me nervous. If we don't have to go out to the community this year, that's what makes me nervous. But I see your point. I do think, in large part, this presentation is saying next year, our goal will be the same, preserve program at all costs. We believe in our program. We need to talk about how great this program is. That's my big takeaway from this year, is we need to go back out and say, our program works. Our program has a great impact. It's worth fighting for. I don't think we need to fight for it this year, because I don't want to threaten it either.
I think these points are linked. I agree about the risk. I think that the conversations last year that, I mean, I don't have scientific data to back this up, but I have a lot of anecdotal personal experience to back it up, as we all do, that a lot of people voted yes, saying, I'm not voting yes next year. So that's it's not like a legally binding promise. So we don't need to use the word promise, but it was part of the conversation, and it was part of how we got over the hump on the second vote. So the risk is tied to that, and I just think it would be negligent to sort of have amnesia about that, because I agree about the risk. It was really scary last year when we were looking at that second vote, and a lot of those yeses came in, as far as I was privy to, on that condition. So I don't really want to test that calculus, but I agree with having this long-term conversation about next year.
I think
sure.
one of the things that'll help with the long term is also settling some contracts. I would like to see a teachers' union contract settled for, however many years. Right now, we're on a memorandum of agreement, a one-year agreement that froze everyone's pay last year. That was part of going from budget 1 to budget 2. We'd like to increase pay, perhaps. And then the other thing is, I recognize that we have a deal with Haldane that it only includes the current 8th grade. We do not have a rate with Haldane for any year beyond this current graduating class. We have the option, thanks to the public, to enter into an agreement for more years, and we have entered into a multi-year agreement that covers all the students in the 8th grade and the ones who are over there with increases at CPI or 2%, right? Which matches our other districts, and not to charge us for special education below 60%, which matches the other districts. So those are some things I'd like to see settled going into next year. The high school may still wish to go to year. We can't control that. David?
I mean, I don't think we know enough now to commit that we definitely are going to do an override next year. But I think we should certainly let the community know that it's very likely that we're going to do an override next year, and that we should prepare for that sooner rather than later. I think Jocelyn's right about that. I agree with that.
And just to be clear, that is also, when we say prepare, it's what the board can do is really just provide information as we see it come in.
Exactly.
So that might be more, what are our presentations? What information do we need to share with the public going forward so that people understand?
Is it your sense, Joe, that if we get lucky with FEMA and we hit the jackpot, that's going to reduce the likelihood of going up for an override next year?
I think what it would do is it would definitely change the amount that would be required. That obviously would change the amount that would be required. It's still probably likely that you will need an override. And you may need an override, some years out from next year. Because I would say it is fair to say that in order to have the level of program that people desire, it would be necessary to change the revenue picture in a significant way over the next 10 years or something like that. So I think that that the degree of additional aid we get, if we get $180,000 from the state, and then we get close to $400,000 from FEMA, that's a lot different than we don't get anything from the state and we get $60,000 from FEMA and that's all we get. It could be anywhere between any of that. We could get none of it, but it's probably likely we'll at least get some of the FEMA money.
But
our budget is not really anticipating that 600 for next year anyway.
No.
So we already know we need, like, to go, okay, so we already know that we need to probably go for it, and there's no way to provide any kind of estimate yet.
Well, there are ways to provide estimates, but the further you get out, obviously, the
harder it is.
the degree of certainty in your estimate are less. So could we provide a estimate as to what next year's budget would look like, assuming some assumptions? Yes, we could. And we probably could provide some sort of rough estimate, you know, in time for the public to vote on it. But how good will that be? It's hard to say.
I think that will be really, really helpful for us and the community, just to get a sense, okay, this is the budget that we're looking at. These are the unknowns. This is the bottom line. And this is the deficiency and how much we would need to make sure that we keep the program, that we keep staffing, just to reassure not only the community, but also the teachers, the staff, and the programs that have taken a couple of years to set up. And this is a great school. I mean, everyone comes, like, we came to Garrison for the school, and there are other families that are doing the same. So providing that reassurance and understanding what are we looking at and for next year, given what we know today, and what does that mean of an increase for a $500,000 homeowner? Like, how much would that go up? Just knowing that it's just an estimate, given what we know now, would go a long way.
If I could just add to there, there's one other, Joe touched on this on one of the slides, but to elaborate, during the early Finance Committee meetings, I did share with the board that there was a possibility of establishing a special class program here in Garrison. Now that renovations are complete, we have the space for it. Phil Benante and I have been speaking for well over a year about trying to partner. If we had similar students with similar needs, instead of sending them off, you know, to other districts or BOCES, if possible, could we create a program here and partner on that? That is looking more and more like a reality. I don't think it was appropriate to speak about publicly because first we needed to speak to the families, make sure if a child was placed out, are they willing to come back to Garrison? I think I can say at this point that there is a very strong likelihood. We've reached out to families, we've done visits, we've spoken with our counterparts in Haldane. So that is something that the motivation behind it is what's best for children, right? It's always to educate them in the least restrictive environment, close to home. That is what most families want, and that is what I believe is best for children, Madeline, and for the rest of the board. But that is something that also has some financial implications to the positive. So instead of sending, you know, one child maybe to Croton and one child to Somers and one child to BOCES, and remember, one individual van costs approximately $65,000. The programs can cost upwards of $80,000 to $100,000. We are required by law to meet children's needs, but we can do that in a more cost-effective way here. We think we could offer the same quality, if not better. I would argue probably better because we have a really strong staff and a wonderful principal with a strong special education background. So that is what we're looking at, and it won't be 100% certain by the time you need to adopt this budget, but that is also information that will play into our calculations for next year, and I expect to have, you know, some final information on this by May or June the latest. So that is another potential positive.
Once we have the program in place, it would likely be a 12-1-1. So that means we could open up seats at tuition rates to other neighboring districts as well and add it as a revenue stream. I believe that type of revenue, like currently you don't count that revenue as revenue. It goes into fund balance when we have it. Is that correct?
Right, well, it would be school tuition, and it would come in as tuition from other districts. And if we got it, obviously, it would increase fund balance, yes.
That's a great idea and a great program.
Do I have any other comments, questions, or thoughts on this budget as presented? For the reminder to the board that we can only talk about it here when convened in public. So if there's any thoughts we want to share, this is really the time and place to do it, because the next meeting will be our final presentation and adoption. That didn't sound serious enough for all of you to jump in with more. All right. Then I think we have a majority of the board in favor of supporting this budget, so.
I just want to say, I will of course support this budget because I support the school.
Yes.
I'm just pushing for the things I've already said a million times.
And while we're being
Adding more
graceful,
comments?
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I'm sort of calculating risk, as to use Sarah's word. So I think we all want the same things, and I think we're maybe slightly calculating risk differently. But I think everything you're saying, I sort of want to stand up and applaud the goals behind what you're saying and the prudence that you're using and looking at kind of the long-term fiscal health of the district. I think this budget is like the way to support all the program that you were talking about, Courtney. And to me, it is a path toward fiscal health, but I completely tip my hat to. Yeah.
Making Joe do more calculations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, Joe, you wrote down what she asked for, what they asked for.
I know I know where she's
Okay.
getting at. I know exactly
Thank
what
you.
she's asking me.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Well, on that note, then, I think we are going to move on. Let me grab the right piece of paper here. And next, we move on to the discussion and adoption of the 2023-2024 board meeting schedule. Everyone has a copy of the board meeting schedule in front of them. The only thing I would ask is that I would like to add a board retreat. We will now have new members joining us. We didn't have a retreat last summer as we did not have new members. I think we would be wise to have a Saturday in July or August. Carl, you'll have to tell me when you guys want to go on vacation at some point, maybe, if you wish to do such a thing. But I'd like to have a Saturday meeting of the board. So if everyone who will be here next year, Courtney, remind David, will send me some proposed Saturdays that work for you. We'll try and get one together. David, we're talking about the board meeting schedule for next year now, and I'm just saying that over the summer, I'd love to have a Saturday retreat. The components of that retreat will also include, similar to when we onboarded a new member last time, a presentation by council who will come walk us through the role of being a board member. If there's any other questions, like larger scope, that we have for council at that time, we could ask them and they could do a deeper dive into something for us. We would just need to let them know in advance so they could prepare that. We can do a book group again. If anybody wants to propose a book we should all read and discuss, a movie we can all watch, things like that. So start thinking, send those ideas to me. But other than that, that's my only proposed change to this meeting agenda as presented. Oh, the other thing I want to say, we could reach out to O'Neill and ask them when they wish to do a joint meeting with us now, so it doesn't sneak up on us and isn't scheduled for the same night as our high school musical. That would be great.
Also help in terms of O'Neill and any of our high schools to do a joint meeting. Since we moved up the high school choice date this year by several months, it would be really helpful to do those joint presentations, perhaps if they wanted to bring in their high school students to talk about their high school programming, to do it in the fall, maybe late fall before that, assuming we're keeping the high school choice deadline in December.
I think we have to
To
per the
align it.
contract. Per the
Yeah.
contract that's required. So yes, let's ask all 3 high schools if they wish to come meet with us. They certainly don't have to, but if they wish to, we would welcome them, of course. And seeing as we went to O'Neill last time, maybe they'll come to us on a Wednesday. So, all right. Anyone else have any proposed changes to this calendar?
Actually, yes.
Okay. go
Not
for it.
that, it's not really a change, I just happened to note, because that in 2024, the April 23rd meeting is the BOCES budget vote, which I know we don't set. But from another scheduling meeting, I just happened to look, that is the first night of Passover. And I don't know if that was, if BOCES realized that, and if that is a consideration or something we just might want to note, if that affects anybody's schedules.
We can reach out to them and double check. Maybe it was an oversight.
That might be a statewide date, though.
Yeah,
pretty sure
that's
it is.
statewide date.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just sort of surprised. 'Cause we had had a conversation about the holidays.
There was a lot of debate amongst the clerks too about Passover and building their own calendars as well. Because what we got from BOCES included the 23rd.
Got it.
Matt and I want to express our appreciation to Rabbi McCarthy for
I'm here for you.
Seconded.
Okay. Well, keeping that is a state date that we actually can't change ourselves, I'm going to still go ahead with this resolution unless there's any other proposed changes, and we will add the date for the retreat and adopt that as an amendment later on. So just send me your
Why on
proposed
this
dates.
night do we vote for the budget?
Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby adopts the 2023-2024 Board of Education meeting schedule as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? All right, we've done president's remarks, so I'm going to skip ahead to superintendent's remarks. Carl?
Okay, just 3 quick things. First, thank you to everyone who joined us on Saturday, gave us at least 2 hours of your family time. We appreciate it. Also, thank you to all of those who are emailing, coming in person and meeting with Joe and me, and I know many of our board members. What I would say is please continue. If you have questions, if your neighbors or friends have questions, it is not a burden. I know I'm being repetitive, but I want to emphasize that we are happy to keep that dialogue going, indefinitely about the budget because it is very important. Also, I just wanted to mention that today we had a DEI meeting with our building level team, and some really exciting work is happening. We had a consultant from BOCES come in and work with us about auditing literature and making sure that it is culturally responsive. It is very timely because we are about to start considering orders for next year. We have very robust classroom libraries. We also have plans for enhancing the library books that are in this space that we're in now. So that work will continue, and on Juneteenth, we actually have a professional conference day, which is dedicated to continued work in this area. Also, I want to thank Mr. Yap for reaching out and facilitating a partnership with Desmond Fish Library. They were here on site today. We had a great meeting. We discussed how to partner and how they could support us in promoting literacy and getting books to our children. We do not have a full-time librarian, but we do have qualified staff here, and we do have this amazing organization that is really, quarter of a mile down the street, and they were very, very receptive to supporting us starting now over the summer and all throughout, next school year and of course into the future, where they would have rotating collections here. Students would be able to check out books, and we have a great plan. So stay tuned for more information on that. We look forward to that partnership. That's all.
Do you have any questions for Carl and his remarks? Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to public comment. If you'll grab the sign-in sheet for me. Public comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns. In accordance with policy 1510 of the Garrison Union Free School District, any person wishing to speak shall comply with all provisions of this policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of board policy. Concerns regarding students or personnel should be discussed privately with the superintendent or appropriate administrator. Comments should be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers are asked to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. The board will listen to comments but will not engage in dialogue. Any necessary follow-up will be noted and provided through the appropriate channel. Members of the public wishing to comment during board meetings are asked to place their name and town of residence on the sign-in sheet. Commenters will be invited to the podium, and we ask that you just introduce yourself. Ned Roush, come on up.
Good evening, everybody. Ned Rouch from Garrison. I have 2 kids in school here, a kindergartner and a 2nd grader. And first to begin with, Madeline, thank you for your service on the board. I commend you for it, and we're all better for your work. So thank you very much. And, thanks for the rest of you as well, board and administration. I'll be brief. I just want to say I'm disappointed in this budget. I think we needed to ask more of our community. I think we needed to ask more in this budget. I know you've all thought it through. I'm not questioning your motives or anything like that, but I am disappointed. I think we need to be real with this community. You can stand on school property. You can follow the purple trail up into the school forest and look south and see Midtown Manhattan. You can see the towers of the skyscrapers of Manhattan. We are not far from the heart of the greatest city in the world, arguably, right? It seems ridiculous to me that we're talking about losing buses, or we're talking about, gee, do we have an art teacher or not? We are in the heart of things. We're in the thick of things. And it just seems ridiculous to be at this point of chipping away. We need to do more. We need to ask more of our community. To that end, I got to say, I disagree with this notion of a promise, be it literal or figurative. I was in the thick of it last year of converting votes, getting people out to vote, and we won. More people voted for an override than not, right? And I spent a lot of time getting those votes. Nowhere was there a talk of a promise that we weren't going to do it again next year. Nowhere in our group and nowhere individually did that come up. I can't speak to all of your own private conversations, but in the work I did, that wasn't part of it. There was no promise on the table. What was on the table was talking about how going forward, we were going to need to have these discussions with our community. We were going to have to start right away as soon as the budget passed. But that's the same thing you guys just said tonight. And that didn't happen in that last year. Months went by without a public push. So if part of the strategy in adopting this budget includes real public outreach, then I hope that this time it begins immediately and doesn't get pushed down another year. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Charity Shumway.
Hi, I'm Charity Shumway, and I'm a Garrison resident. Thank you all for all of your time in thinking about this budget and working so hard to come up with a plan that you feel like supports our students. I think we all share the same goals of having this be a great school. And I think so many of the things you said tonight, I absolutely agree with. I jotted some notes down, that we do have a mismatch between our revenue and our needs, that we need to address that long term, that there is a problem drawing down our fund reserves, and that leaves us vulnerable. And that, last year was scary, and we don't want to be in that position again. I think the problem I have is I reach a different conclusion when I agree with all of those things. And for me, instead of saying, let's do a 3.3% vote that tells everybody we can do this with some cuts and moving things around and we're fine, I think everyone will just remember you were fine this year. And next year, if we say, actually, we're not fine, and it's scary like it was last year, where it's everything on the line, where it's, you go down the list of teachers and the school counselor and all the things that are on the line again, no one will remember that that's real. They'll just say, you did it last year, just move some things around again. It's always fine. I think you're believing that people are engaged in a way that they're not. I don't think people are getting into the details of these presentations. I mean, how many people are here and how many voters are there? I think people remember the big picture message of, they're fine. They just figure it out. And they don't believe that those cuts are real, but they are. So I don't want to be in that position again. It was awful. I mean, all of us here agree it was just a terrible year last year when that was all on the line. And my fear, and I know you've already voted, so it's a little late, but my fear is that what you're doing is setting that exact problem up again next year. So that's my disappointment with your choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I have Eric Arnold.
Hi, Eric Arnold, here in Garrison. I have 2 kids in the school. And first off, thank you to Matt and Madeline. You're both going to be greatly missed on this board. And Joe and Carl, thank you both for your tireless work and meeting with everybody. So I'm not a student of history, but I am a student of politics and communications. It's pretty much what I do for a living. And to echo what Charity just said, I see us signing up to repeat our recent unfortunate past. It's clear from the presentations we've had, from what Joe has said, that the way to match revenues with expenditures and to protect and expand, long-term programming to preserve the teachers' retirement funds so they're confident and excited to come here every day is to take on steady, palatable, predictable overrides of 5 to 6% over the next few years. It's just math. And I think that's a message that we can sell to the broader community. It's presenting a clear path out of insecurity and toward comfortable stability and still maintaining one of the lowest tax rates in the state. And instead, looking 12 months out, it feels like with this budget, we're willingly repeating the same mistake we made last year on that 9% vote. We weren't organized or consistent with our messaging, and we let a few misanthropes who believe that paying the lowest possible taxes always trumps having a well-funded school. We let them control the narrative and spread misinformation, even though they weren't all that organized. And in the end, we got a 50-50 result at the polls. And that tells me that election was very winnable. And it's just math, because on the second vote, we showed that both, as Ned alluded to, that changing people's minds and drawing more yes votes was really achievable. Matt, you mentioned, the people who flipped their votes. The total spread between the 2 votes in the no column was 45. And we eclipsed that comfortably at 614 to 269. We know the number of voters we have to turn out in order to prevail in an override. We know who those voters are based on our database that we put together, and we know how to reach them. But I feel like instead we're really acquiescing to the minority here, the people who just want to do what we did back in 2011. Thank you. That was actually really good context. And I think if anybody made an implicit or explicit promise not to seek an override, that was a serious error. And I think since we came into crafting this budget trying to resist an override to satisfy that minority, I'm curious if anyone asked those people, how they feel about a long-term cycle of big overrides every other year. I assume we didn't. And even if we did, you can't trust those same 300 malcontents not to fight you next year. Political history is likely to repeat in perpetuity here, not because we're allowing it, because I fear that with this approach, we're actively inviting it. I don't love the ARC cut, but I understand it. I agree that we don't need 4 buses. And I'm really encouraged by a lot of the other plans that you guys have in the works that may pay off in the short and the long terms. But all combined, to me, those things don't really add up to the choice of putting us on shaky financial footing again in a year's time. I think we should ask the voters for the percentage we need, not the percentage that we backed into to try and satisfy 300 people who will never support the school, no matter their percentage. I really believe that we should be focusing on the majority who ultimately turned out for us last year. We should be focusing on that majority that understands the value that the school brings to the community and to our kids and to our home values. that majority really wants to fight for the teachers and to set an example for the kids that doing the right thing is really often the hard thing. It's not kicking the can down the road. So, look, in my opinion, we know how to win an override election, and so I still do believe that we should try. And if we fail, fine. We come back with this budget, we get our 50% at the polls, and we try for a bigger override next year, just like we planned. Personally, I want to go to bed at night knowing that the basics of a strong educational experience are a given. And I'm pretty tired of, feeling like the basics are always on the verge of being taken. So I'm just concerned that this isn't a budget that motivates people and gets them excited about the community's future. It's a budget that keeps them worried and on edge about the future. But now, having said that, I wholeheartedly appreciate the work that you all do on your own time and how consuming it is. I sincerely thank you for that, and I truly believe your intentions are good, and that's why, like Jocelyn, if 3.3% is where we land, I personally am going to fight for it like it's 5 or 6 or 10 or 20. I won't vote against this school ever, and I hope that everyone here tonight who wants to see us do better in the long term will ultimately unite and rally for a really decisive victory at the polls, whatever the number is. So, while I'll fight like hell for 3.3%, I do hope that, to echo Ned's comment, that next year, we choose a much more open budget process that paints a really clear vision of the long term and how we get there. Because, based on where we are now, I personally feel like the journey ahead should feel more like a ride on a train moving along the tracks up a gradual straight line to a plateau of comfortability, and not like a roller coaster that feels like it could fly off the rails every other year. And to me, that feels like the choice that we seem to be making with this budget. We can do better, we should do better, and I hope that we can all unite around that one way or another. We're all on the same team here, and I really hope that soon we all come together and show it, and we're going to need to in about a month. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Lauren Benares.
So first of all, thank you all so much. I can't imagine the amount of time and sleepless nights you've all put into this. Madeline, we're going to miss you so much. Matt, we're going to really miss you. I support this budget, and I support it mostly because I think it's realistic. And I obviously, our tax rate is way too low. It's too low to be sustainable. It can't work. There will definitely have to be more than one, I'm sure, overrides in our future. But that being said, asking the community to vote year after year after year, even if it's not a huge leap, but it's still an override and requires that 60% supermajority, I think I don't see that as a realistic possibility that will sustain itself over time. I think if we ask for that every year, we are signaling to this community that we didn't hear any of their concerns from before. There may be, the fact of the matter is people value different things. And you can put the judgment on someone's value, well, it's wrong that you value this and you don't value that, but we're in a context and we're in a community, and it feels to me like asking for an override this year, next year, whenever, is just ignoring a past pattern. It's ignoring huge, this is not a huge population because it's a tiny place, but a really big percentage of this population that's been here for more than, a handful of years. And you don't just go into a community and then ignore the voices in that community and want it to change overnight. We didn't get into this overnight or over the past 5 years or even over the past 10 years. This has been a decades-long thing. I think it's totally unrealistic to think that we can get ourselves out of this relatively quickly by asking our community over and over and over again to say, yes, I'll pay more taxes. They've proven that they won't do that. Whether that's right or wrong is it kind of doesn't matter, because if it can't happen, if it's not realistically going to happen, why would it even be on the table in my mind? I also think it's an extremely unfair ask to the administration and to the teachers every single year to be put in that position of praying that an override happens, and if it doesn't, feeling like, oh my gosh, everything's going to be on the chopping block, because that's how it was last year. The 50% thing that we need to get just a regular budget passed, that has not always been easy to achieve here. It's not a given. So like going to contingency and saying, or not going to contingency, the first one, not passing, and then assuming, okay, well, we'll go back to what's legal and that'll pass. That's not the reality here. And I think it's a very different reality, I think, from a lot of maybe the schools and the settings that a lot of us have moved here from recently. But you don't just go into a community and then ignore what lots of voices in that community say. And I don't think it's fair for the administration and the teachers, and that comes from speaking to people. That was so deflating and demoralizing, and it was an emotional roller coaster for everyone, but for the teachers and administration big time. I actually think it's kind of cruel to ask them to do that year after year. So I support this budget, I support this approach. I know there will be a need for an override, and I will support that too, but that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Public comment is still open. If anyone else wishes to speak, I just need you to come sign in, but you're welcome to the podium at this time. Come on up. If you don't mind just signing in for me. There you go. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hi, everyone. I am Peter Lesser. I live in Garrison. I have a kindergartner at Guffs, and my daughter is 3, so I hope she'll be here too in a few years. And I've heard a lot of words here like, we're in trouble. I've heard a lot of words, or a lot of statements that begin with if. If we get this money, things might work out. If we get this money, things might work out a little bit better. That doesn't make me feel very confident in the future. I think it's pretty clear from the numbers and from the presentation that the future doesn't look great at this point. And so, but what I am confident in is people like my friend Eric Arnold and Ned Roush and Charity and others who will work their butts off to get an override passed. That's what they did. With the second round especially last year, and it worked. We cleared the bar, and then some, and Eric put the numbers of the votes in front of you. And we also heard the term risk, and I don't see the risk in trying. You have people who will work very, very hard. Some of them are here today, and I'm very confident that they can get it done. We all know what we need longer term, and this is not just a one-year thing. We shouldn't just think 1 year and then hope and say, if we get this, it'll be okay. We should take action, get involved, and work for what we know we need, which is continuous, slightly higher increases than the minimum over the next few years. So I think that's very clear. I believe in these people who will work very hard. I will work very hard for that, and I think that's what we should do.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. No worries.
Hi, my name is Michael Rauch. I have a son in kindergarten and 2 more coming behind him. My brother sort of led a bunch of the charge last year for the override. I am a selfish person. I didn't really participate because I didn't have a kid in the school at that time, sorry, but we've been around for a while. We had an aunt who was on the school board when we were little kids, I didn't go to school here, but I bristle at the idea of newcomers not being allowed to participate the same way old timers are. I sort of reject that concept. I think people have a voice in this community, and it should be heard. And I think people have a responsibility to the school, regardless of, I know I say this having just said what I said, regardless of whether they have a kid in it. I've learned that. It's a new thing for me. But sort of recently paying attention to the school budget, I applaud your work. I mean, it's a tough thing to do. It's clearly complicated. I clearly never understood how property taxes work. I firmly believe that a lot of people don't understand what we're asking for when we talk about these percentages. And I think we need to be really clear that it's not that much money at the end of the day. I'm not passing on judgment on what's a lot of money or a little bit of money. It's really not that much money. The difference between, 3 and 4%. It's, stuff has gotten more expensive. Cost of living adjustments have been made to Social Security, to fixed income programs. They're not being made here, yet we're feeling the effects of it. I trust you guys. I know some of you personally, and I want to follow your lead on this, totally. But I do think this is a difficult problem to solve long-term, and long-term is what a guy with a kid in kindergarten and 2 younger ones needs. We need to put this school on the right track, and we need to do whatever it takes to get towards that in a relatively fast way. So I encourage that. I think all options should be on the table. I don't want to sound like the tinfoil hat guy, but I think consolidation should be discussed in this broader context. I think that could be something that some people love or some people hate, but it looks expensive to me. And that might be our next best alternative if the community isn't ready to give the school what it needs to thrive. So I hope some of that made sense. I'm sort of going here, but thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to speak, public comment remains open. Anybody? Okay. If anyone doesn't want to speak, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Thank you very much, and we're going to move on. All right. We have next up the acceptance of the minutes. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District does hereby accept the minutes of the regular meeting of March 1st, 2023, the regular meeting of March 15th, 2023, and the special meeting of March 22nd, 2023, as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Does anyone have any questions, concerns, anything on the minutes as presented? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Thank you. Move on to financial reports. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the Treasurer's Report for February 2023 and the Claims Audit Report for February 2023 as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Seconded.
Do you have any questions or concerns regarding the Treasurer's Report or Claims Audit Report? Anything you want to note that was really exciting in these reports, Joe? No, just ordinary, yeah. All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Okay. Next, we have CSE, CPSE recommendations. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District approved the Committee on Special Education, CSE, and the Committee on Preschool Special Education, CPSE, recommendations and student placements. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Okay, we move on to the consent agenda. Be resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, does hereby approve the items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Have any questions? Carl, do you want to speak to any of the items on the personnel consent agenda?
I can run through them very quickly, and then certainly if there's any questions. We have a per diem sub this time of year. It gets busy. We've had a few substitute teachers move on. So we recommend adding one to our pool of subs. The second one is just a correction. We have someone retiring who just miscalculated and is extending his retirement date by one business day. Also, there is a request to extend, or a recommendation to extend, our CSE, CPSE chair. That is the current person, just based on the projection of how many meetings we need between now and the end of the school year. She does need an additional 20 work days. The next one is the approval for some extended time for our part-time school psychologist. This is an additional 25 days. We may not use it. We are fortunate this is, the expense of this is being covered by a CDC grant through Putnam County. And then there are election inspectors and the chairperson, who is Dusty Callow. It is, for the most part, the same team as last year, maybe one new person. They do an outstanding job every year, and we recommend that they return to do the work.
Question on that CDC grant. Is that something that can be expected for next year, and is it only for,
Well, it was just a one-year grant, Madeline. Yes.
A good question. All right, do I have any other questions regarding the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Move on to new business. Approval of revised policies 5681, 6121, 6215, 6550, 7350, 7512, 7522, 7530, 7670, 8240, 8450. Oh gosh, I'm not going to read them again. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Courtney McCarthy, Policy Committee Chair, hereby approved the policies I just listed as amended and hereby abolishes Policy 8240. Does that suffice? Okay. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Courtney, do you want to speak to these as Policy Chair?
Sure. Very briefly, Policy Committee met a couple of weeks ago. We're aiming to meet quarterly at this point, now that our full policy binder is done. These are recommendations from Erie One BOCES, and then also consulting counsel, following legal recommendations to amend these policies or remove them. Is that about right?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on changes in either law or regulations.
Thank you, Dusty.
Thank you, Courtney. Did anyone have any questions for Courtney and the Policy Committee on these as presented? All right. Go ahead and move to a vote then. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Okay, next we have the request for approval to establish voter registration dates. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby establishes its voter registration period effective May 1st, 2023 through May 2nd, 2023, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. And be it further resolved that voter registration shall be conducted by the District Clerk of the Garrison Union Free School District. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on voter registration? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Approval of Health and Welfare Services, Somers Central School District. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the contract for health and wellness services with the Somers Central School District for the 2022-2023 school year for 2 students for an amount of $2,602.62. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you.
I can speak to that.
Great.
So essentially, when you have students that attend private school and they are in a neighboring school district, the neighboring school district is responsible for providing health and welfare services to the private school kids. So the district where the student's home is has to pay for those services, and that's all these items for health and welfare services on the agenda tonight are the same.
Does anyone have any questions for Joe regarding these? All right. For the Somers one, I got a motion on that, right? We're good. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Nays? Abstentions? Okay, moving on to the approval of health and welfare services for Greenburgh Central School District. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the contract for health and welfare services with the Greenburgh Central School District for the 2022-2023 school year for one student for an amount totaling $1,229.90. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? A request for approval of health and welfare services, White Plains Central School District. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the contract for health and welfare services with the White Plains Central School District for one student for an amount totaling $1,194.79 for the 2022-2023 school year. May I have a motion, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Next, we have a request for approval of a memorandum of agreement with the Garrison Teachers Association for parent-teacher conference days. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, hereby approves a memorandum of agreement with the Garrison Teachers Association dated March 29, 2023, as presented at this meeting. May I have a motion, please?
Second.
Thank you. Carl, do you want to speak to this briefly?
Sure. We appreciate our GTA and our teachers agreeing once again next year to have 4 parent-teacher conference days over the course of the school year and to stay here till 6 p.m. to accommodate parents. It's working out really well this year, so we're going one more year. I think if we're all in agreement after that, we would propose that it becomes a permanent part of our collective bargaining agreement with our teachers. So this is for 1 year, and potentially we may make it permanent somewhere in the future.
Thank you, Carl. Any questions for Carl regarding this agreement? Okay. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays? Abstentions? Next, we have a request for approval of transfer of funds from Tax Certiorari Reserve Fund to General Fund. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the transfer of $22,640 from the Tax Certiorari Reserve Fund to the General Fund for outstanding tax settlements for the 2022-2023 fiscal year. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Joe, did you want to speak to this briefly?
Yes, so we did get notified of a tax cert settlement for the Hudson Highlands Golf Course. There was an open cert claim for that property. The owners of the property petitioned to have their assessment reduced. It basically cut that assessment in half. Part of the terms of the settlement is that the taxpayer is refunded the overpayment of taxes based upon the settlement in this fiscal year. So we have to do that. That's much larger than what we typically budget for this expense. So that's why we're asking for the reserve for it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Joe?
Something that was expected or something that we knew was going to come up? We didn't know how much, and are we going to have similar, I know it's hard to forecast, but is this something that can happen again next year?
It's something that can happen. There's not many properties that it would be likely to happen for. We only knew about the possibility of this in October. And then it wasn't until December till it was decided at what the amount was going to be.
When we budget for tax certs, we budget based on historic data as to how much we spent year over year.
Yes.
And the amount we can keep in our reserve is based on how much we typically pay out in tax certs.
Well,
There's a limit,
it's
right?
also based on what the potential claims are that are in the pipeline. So as the process essentially, someone submits a petition and then it gets in the docket of things that get reviewed. There's a attorney that works on behalf of the town that, that negotiates and pushes back against these things, and then it goes to the court, and they decide.
Thank you. All right, move to a vote unless there are other questions. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions. We've now come to our second public comment section of this evening. If anyone else wishes to speak, I'm not going to read my whole paragraph again, but same terms apply, and you're welcome to sign in. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and close the second public comment and move on to board member comment and other discussion. Jocelyn, you're up first.
Obviously, thank you, Madeline, and we'll miss you, but I mean, I'll still see you because our kids are in the same class. But appreciate all that you did and still do. It's going to be sad.
Thank you for staying. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're amazing.
And then I think the only other thing regarding this whole budget thing is, we didn't vote yet on, this proposed budget, but we are going to vote in 2 weeks. And as we all stated, we are in favor of, each of us did state this tonight, that we are in favor of the budget. And I just want to make that clear, that in 2 weeks, we will officially do the vote. And I'm very glad that you asked for some additional numbers just to give Joe a little more homework. I think it would help, I think it's going to help the folks who really do, who really want to understand more what we're going to be asking the community for, just to have a little bit in the back pocket, to go to them with. So thank you in advance. That's it.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Okay, David?
Love you, Madeline. I just wanted to say that I picked up a kind of an undercurrent of grimness or bleakness about the school's prospects. And, this is a bad time. I can't remember exactly some of the words that were used, but they were along those lines. And I got to say, I've been on this board for 5 years now. This school is stronger than it's ever been in my tenure here. It really is. It's got an extraordinary management team, which is both very effective and aspirational. I mean, if you want a program that you want to propose, they're very open to hearing your ideas. I don't think the school is perfect. It could be better in some important ways, but it is a very good school. And the idea of being, of course there are budget issues and we all have our own, problems with it. I think we're probably more in agreement than not. But it's important to correct the impression that this school is on a downward slope, because it really isn't. It's better than it's ever been, and it's going to get even better.
Thank you, David. Madeline, you're up next.
I just want to say thank you to all of you and to the community and to the staff. It's been great, and I look forward to helping as needed in other ways. But this has been a great experience. These last 3 years, I think it's been 3 years. I was here during COVID and did not see that coming. A lot of us did not see that coming. And I just have to say that I heard a lot about what everyone else at work was going through with their kids. And this was one of the very few districts that was able to provide in-person learning in 2020, fall of 2020. The teachers show up, the staff showed up, everyone showed up, and that's something that it's amazing, it's great. So we can't forget that, and we can't forget when everyone came in from teachers, staff, community, to just make sure that we continue in-person training. So thank you, Carl, thank you, Joe. Thank you to all of the teachers, all of the staff for showing up. And Dusty, thank you so much. our private investigator looking at. It's been great. I'm gonna stop because it's late, but I really appreciate it. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve with all of you.
Thank you, Madeline. Courtney?
Thank you, Madeline. I don't know if I can say anything better than anybody else has, but thank goodness you were on the board to read all those purchase orders and explain what they mean, because I still don't get it. But all of your insight was invaluable, and it's been a pleasure working with you. The only other thing I wanted to say was thinking about this budget process and last year's budget process. I met David Gelber, now it seems like a very long time ago, when our eldest were second graders, and we formed this little coalition of rabid second grade parents determined to come in and change the school and improve the school. And hopefully, it's been a number of years. I hope that we did. And I know that there's more changes to come, and I look forward to seeing what new community members and new parents have to offer. As much as it's always hard to hear when perhaps people disagree with you, part of the thing I like about the budget process was, as I love hearing people come out, and I can't believe I'm actually going to say this, but I'm going to support Sarah's recommendation of come to all the board meetings. Come listen to the discussions, come see the presentations, not when it's just about the numbers, but when we're hearing from teachers and administrators about what's happening in the school, because there's a lot of good things that are happening, and there's a lot of things that certainly still need work, and we need people involved. So thank you to everybody who comes out.
Thank you, Courtney. Matt?
It's starting to feel requisite. I almost feel like I shouldn't thank you now, Nicole, but thank you, and I echo all of that. And I also just want to thank everybody for such thoughtful engagement, and it's complicated, and conversation, and it's challenging, and I just really appreciate the spirit and civility with which everybody engages in this community. It just makes me happy to be a part of it and of the conversation. So thank you.
All right, I have a few closing things. First, I just want to remind the community and us as a board, we can only take action when duly convened as a group. We need a quorum. So this is the only place the board does any work. The board doesn't do any work outside of this, other than we go to committee meetings and whatnot, but in terms of formally taking action,
I don't know if I can fully endorse that phrasing, but I know what you mean.
Well, I make you read, you have to read a lot of stuff, you have to go to a lot of meetings, but we can't take action outside of these meetings. And also, the board cannot advocate for the budget. We can only present facts. We can't tell people how to vote. We can't be in any part of that. So that, when I'm hearing people talk about, oh, we need to get out there, that is not us. That is the PTA. That is someone else. We can present you with the facts. So I just want to make sure that was really clear, that board members cannot advocate inside this meeting or outside this meeting in any way for the budget. We hope we've presented the facts. If you don't understand them, you have questions, we welcome that, and we would love to set up a meeting with Carl. You can email us. And then I'm going to get to your thank you at the end, but I'm going to shift gears away from the budget and just note a couple things that have been happening in our community. And I hope, as we talk about high schoolers, we can become more aware of our 3 high schools too. It's not just this K-8. There was a wonderful production of Oklahoma, starring Maya Gelber, at Haldane that I had the privilege of seeing. I've never been so excited to sit through 3 hours of a musical. It was excellent. Really was wonderful. So congratulations to our students, who we still consider Guff students, who performed there. Putnam Valley, who is our new partner, has their musical coming up, as does O'Neill. Haldane that same night was in the state championships in boys basketball. They came so close. 1 point away from winning, 3 points, sorry. very, very close from winning the state championship. And the fact that they made it that far is wonderful. I know we had players who are Garrison students on that team. We congratulate them. That same evening, our new partner, Putnam Valley's girls basketball team, was competing in the state finals as well. They also fell short, but we congratulate them on making it. One thing I'd like us to get in the habit of is really talking about where our students are and what's happening at those schools, because there's some amazing accomplishments. And then last week, our very own middle school had their first musical, high school musical. I don't know if I got to see it twice, and it was awesome. I want to thank GSEF for funding it. There's a lot of great programming that happens thanks to the Garrison Children's Education Fund, which brings me to one of my last notes, that they are having their spring thaw on April 29th. So if anyone wants to go out and support the school, that's a wonderful way to do it. It's going to be over at Bear Mountain, I believe, again, at a merry-go-round, which is super fun. All right. Madison, thank you so much for all you've done. I hope you will sincerely consider serving still on the facilities committee, just a little bit longer. You don't have to, but just think about it. You could always drop in. But thank you again. I know you've poured in so much time, and I also want to applaud. I know you've accomplished a lot in your career beyond this, which is one of your deciding factors for leaving. And so I want to applaud your accomplishments outside of here, which is pretty extraordinary as well. All right. That, I think we can keep going unless anyone else had any further comment. All right. We do not have any reason to enter executive session this evening. Yeah, we can cheer for that one, right? So I'm going to go straight to adjournment. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby adjourns the regular meeting of March 29th, 2023. May I have a motion, please? So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Nays, abstentions.